Thanks, David. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for joining us. To begin today, I want to take a moment to again offer my heartfelt sympathies to Patrick's family and friends as they continue to grieve the loss of their loved one. I understand that this is painful and that many people throughout our community have been deeply impacted. This tragedy has shaken our entire community. And even though the process has been frustrating for many of us, I do want to say how much I appreciate all those who have respected the time needed to complete a comprehensive investigation, enabling the prosecutor to make a decision based on all of the necessary details of this case. This decision by Prosecutor Becker to criminally charge Officer Christopher Schur comes after a thorough investigation by the Michigan State Police and a lengthy review by our prosecutor. The legal determination was made without any input or influence from any member of the Grand Rapids City leadership and is the sole decision of the prosecutor. Today's announcement is an important step in the process of accountability and justice. And as we move forward, we have a lot of work to do. I want to recognize the important role of the staff and the officers and the leadership of our city police department and the role they play in our community. As a mayor and a colleague to 6 city commissioners who have been very clear about our commitment to improving police practices in our city for years, we recognize that this work is more important and it is more urgent than ever. I, along with my colleagues, remain committed to working with our city manager, our police chief, our director of public oversight and accountability, our community partners, some of which are here today, and our residents, as we strive to make long-term systemic changes that create a safer and a better community for everyone. That is our commitment today, and that is the commitment we will continue to have. And with that, I will now turn it to our city manager.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, everyone, for being here. As the Mayor said earlier, this has certainly been a difficult time for our community, as well as our police department. And I've, like many others, have heard the voice of frustration, anger, and disappointment. That deadly force was used by Officer Christopher Schur, who has now been charged with second-degree murder in the shooting of Patrick Lyoya. I understand the community's anxiety these last 2 months as we worked through this process and awaited the prosecutor's decision. It was difficult, but the collective community resilience protected the integrity of the process. Since the beginning of the investigation, I said that I had more questions than answers and was committed to act with transparency and accountability to find out if this fatality was justified use of force, but would allow for a fair and impartial third-party investigative process. I also professionally and personally committed to ensure that there was integrity. Transparency occurred with the releasing of the video publicly, and now accountability question is being answered due to the work of Michigan State Police and the Kent County Prosecutor. I appreciate both the state of Michigan and Kent County for their diligence in conducting a fair and impartial review of this matter. The accountability question, however, will continue in the judicial process and the subsequent employment process and decisions and determinations that we will outline later in this briefing. While the charging decision work is closed, our work within the organization and the community will continue as we continue to evaluate all of the relevant policies and practices. Much of that work has begun, but still remains undone. We will continue to build upon past efforts, such as requiring independent investigations in officer-involved shootings, see how we can improve in that manner. The use and implementation of body-worn cameras, how traffic stops and analysis have been conducted in the past and the future, the use of sworn personnel and deployment, civilianization of officer duties, how our police department interacts with youth, and how we utilize our independent Office of Oversight and Investigation, the Civilian Appeals Board, and violence prevention programs, all continuing questions that areas that we must continue to focus on and are committed to doing so. We will also continue to focus and work on de-escalation and ensuring that our officers are continue to be properly trained, but do so as was supported in my proposed budget, the use of community-informed and community-engaged training in which they're part of the design and will participate in future training that's developed. Police reform requires us to evaluate many long-standing practices and ensure our actions are consistent with the best interests of the community and the individuals involved, as well as the safety of our officers. I look forward to Chief Winstrom's review of departmental practices by the end of July. We have already started the work of interacting with our immigrant and refugee community. I look forward to expanding that conversation as well in all segments of our community. I remain committed to making sure our city is a place where everyone feels safe and is safe at all times. I recognize that this is a never-ending process and it will require active engagement and participation of the entire community if we're going to make that a reality. I will now like to present our Director of Oversight and Public Accountability, Brandon Davis.
Thank you, City Manager, and good afternoon. This has been a tough time for this community. My hope is that today serves as a step toward healing, reconciliation, and justice. My thoughts and prayers are shared with the family of Mr. Patrick Lyoya, with our community and all those who have been impacted by this incident. Since April 4th, our community has had the difficult task of working to heal from the tragic death of Patrick Lyoya at the hands of Christopher Scher, while awaiting charging decisions in this matter. Today, Prosecutor Becker announced his decision to charge Christopher Scher with second-degree murder, a felony punishable by up to life in prison. The criminal investigation and prosecutorial process is an important part of pursuing justice. As we've indicated previously, the City of Grand Rapids does not have the ability to make charging decisions regarding the criminal investigation. However, the city does have the responsibility to thoroughly conduct an internal employment investigation. As you know, pursuant to our city policy, the Michigan State Police conducted the full criminal investigation of this matter. Once those investigative reports are provided to the City of Grand Rapids, the internal employment investigation can and will move forward. The investigation will include the Internal Affairs Division review of the complete employment investigation that will include determining which city or police department rules, procedures, laws, or policies were violated. This may also include additional investigation and other employment steps. Pursuant to city rules and policies, in the event that the chief and the Internal Affairs Division recommend suspension and or termination, the city manager will make the ultimate decision regarding Christopher Scher's employment status. If a recommendation to terminate Christopher Scher is made to the city manager, pursuant to the city procedures, Mr. Scher is entitled to a discharge hearing regarding the allegations that led to termination. Mr. Scher is not required to participate in the hearing. However, he does have a right to that due process hearing. From that point, the city manager will make a determination regarding employment status. Once provided with the opportunity, the Office of Oversight and Public Accountability will review all available evidence, including the police reports to the extent allowed by law. Our office will and expects to continue to receive periodic updates from the Grand Rapids Police Department during their internal affairs investigation. We will evaluate the internal affairs report and findings, and we will release an audit of those findings publicly, redacted to the extent required by law, as quickly as possible. As we've previously indicated, after the investigation is concluded, we will do a post-incident review of the city's actions and consider concerns such as how much time it took to release video of this incident, when should an officer's name be released in connection with an investigation. We'll consider the amount of time it took to render aid. We'll also review what policy changes, if any, can be implemented to help prevent this type of result. We'll look at when officers should use disengagement as a form of de-escalation. We'll also evaluate our current body-worn cameras and their mounting capabilities. We'll consider a sanctity of life policy, a duty to do no harm policy, and we'll also review our paid administrative leave policy. In addition to the internal investigation, the ultimate employment decision and post-investigation audit, the city has also committed and provided resources through the budget process to support increasing engagement on public safety matters and co-creating training with community to help improve public safety outcomes. This is a tough time for the city, for our community, and for the world. The pursuit of justice is not always easy, but it is always necessary. We must seek justice. We must do justice. We must continue to put action behind our words. We must do everything in our power to ensure that all people feel safe and are safe at all times in our community. I will do everything in my power to ensure that the laws and processes are followed fully and transparently to help increase accountability. Thank you. At this time, I'll turn it over to Chief Winstrom.
I want to once again offer my condolences to the Lyoya family for their loss and to thank them for their continued calls for peace during this time. I want to thank the Michigan State Police for all the work that they did to conduct a thorough, independent investigation. I respect the decision of County Prosecutor Becker. Based on the information that I have available to me at this time, I intend to recommend the city manager immediately suspend Officer Scher without pay pending termination. I recognize the impact this will have on a longtime employee and a friend of many at the Grand Rapids Police Department, but I think it is the right thing to do. Over the past 2 months, under the most challenging conditions, the men and women of the Grand Rapids Police Department have been giving 100% and are doing an incredible job for the city. I am unaware of another agency involved in such a high-profile incident which demonstrated such a level of professionalism during such a difficult time. And I'm thankful to be the Chief of Police of the Grand Rapids Police Department.
Department.
So as of today, Officer Scher is still an employee. I'm going to provide a letter to the city manager asking that he be suspended without pay. The way the process works is it's a process before termination by labor law. So we're going to commence that process immediately, but he will be suspended without pay pending termination.
So when will you submit that letter, today or tomorrow?
It will be by close of business today.
So then that would, but in theory, I guess, could he still be employed in, like, I guess, would the city manager
I don't know what his
sign off?
status is physically. I know he was lodged in the jail. He's obviously not at work today. So this is, everything's unfolding in real time for us as well.
I guess, I mean, like, when you submit that letter, would the city manager then sign off on it, or could it be, another day or two until he is actually suspended without pay?
So what the chief is saying, there are employment rights that every employee has, particularly civil servants that are covered by contract. So the chief is going to recommend to me his termination, but he's going to immediately suspend pay. We're going to notice the employee or his representative of the chief's recommendation of my decision to concur with the chief's recommendation pending the outcome of a hearing. We have a hearing that we'll schedule as soon as possible, give the employee a time and his representatives to prepare for it. And after that hearing, we'll make a decision. So I anticipate that to occur mid to early next week.
Chief Winstrom, earlier today, Prosecutor Becker said he informed you of the decision to charge Christopher Scher before he announced it. Wanted to know if you've had any discussions with the GRPD officers, what the kind of morale is like, what the reaction is like, and kind of how the department will move forward, in the coming days after this news.
Yeah, and I have, so it's been about 2 months since I've had a conversation with the prosecutor, so we've not spoken about this incident or about anything else. We reconnected last night. He wanted to give me the a preview of his decision so that if there were deployment decisions we needed to prepare so that we as a department could be prepared. You asked about officer morale. This is going to be a difficult time for the police department. We'll get through it.
Mayor, you talked about the urgency of reforms. There are a lot of people in this community that say that urgency, they've been asking for that urgency long before the April incident. What do you say to them that things haven't moved fast enough, and now you have this?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question, and I would argue that we have made significant changes in partnership with community, actually a lot of them based on feedback from the community, and there's still work to be done. We body-worn cameras, we implemented those after lengthy conversations with community and community input, the creation of the Office of Public Oversight and Accountability. A lot of the work that we have done, I believe, has been important work moving us in the right direction. And is that work ever done? Likely not. Change is hard, especially when you're trying to change really significant systems. But the reality is that there's only so much we can do locally. Right? The police reform, I would argue a number of other reforms that have to happen in systems, we aren't completely responsible for them at the local level. We need reforms at the state level, we need reform at the federal level, and we need to have a lot of changes in different systems to help us get to where we want to be.
Chief, when it comes to reforms in the department, you have policy that the city sets. You also have a union. You have organized labor to deal with. How is that going to work out? I mean, is the union willing to work on some of these things, or is that any kind of...
I think just keeping in communication with the union. I have a good relationship. They know that I'm interested in reviewing all the policies and procedures, and so long as you keep that communication, let them know what's expected of them. I don't anticipate any resistance as far as that goes.
When you get to the bargaining table, do you...
Well, you're talking about, I mean, if you're talking about policies and procedures, but if you're talking about, changes to work conditions, it's a bargaining table issue. Bargaining is ongoing. I don't want to speak to that. I haven't had a table at those discussions at this time. And because it's ongoing, I don't think it'd be appropriate for me to discuss it at this time.
Do you agree with these charges?
I respect the prosecutor's decision. I watched his press conference just as you did. And I believe he's a fair man, and like I've said before, I think he calls balls and strikes. So I respect his decision, as I said.
I get that you respect it, but I'm asking specifically, do you think these are the right charges against your officer?
Yeah, and again, I respect the decision. Now, I have not had conversations with the Michigan State Police yet. I don't actually have that file, which I've been anticipating getting, because they did just conclude this. So we will take a thorough look into the whole investigation myself, but I don't have any reason to believe that Mr. Becker made an incorrect decision.
Were you surprised by the decision?
I'm not surprised by much, no.
Chief, second-degree murder charge here. We've already heard from the family. The family says this is just a start of a little bit of justice. They say it brings a little bit of consolation here. What is your message to the family, but also what do you think this sends out to the community?
Well, my message to the family is what it's always been. I get nothing but love and respect for them. I can't imagine losing a child. I have kids. I am a father, so I understand it. So my message is the same, and I hope that they do find some closure as the process moves forward.
Chief, you haven't really said much what you thought of what you saw in the video. If you're recommending that this officer be fired, there's got to be a reason. The county's decision to charge is totally separate from city policy.
Yeah, well, you've seen the video, I've seen the video, and you have to keep in mind there's going to be a jury down the road that's going to see the video. They're going to make the final determination, as Prosecutor Becker said. This is, the officer's entitled, just as you and I would be, to a presumption of innocence. So I'm not going to stand here and say that he's guilty. But no, I understand the question, and the answer is right. So, based on the information that I have now, including the video, I'm comfortable making the determination that I will proceed through this process to termination.
Sorry, what I'm trying to get at is what is the basis in which you are recommending that you be fired?
Sure. Well, it's the information that I have now, which, as I've said before, I've had a lot of questions over the past 2 months. You've seen the video. Why haven't you fired him yet? And the answer has always been, I don't know what I don't know. I have not seen that investigation. Now I am aware that Prosecutor Becker, who has the entire investigation, has reviewed it, and he's made the determination that there's probable cause for this charge of second-degree murder. That's what gets me to the point where I'm comfortable saying that we can move forward with this process towards termination.
Are you just basing it off of that second-degree murder charge and then the video? Because, you know, a few minutes ago you said that you have not seen the full investigative report by MSP.
So we have not done nothing. We interviewed the officer a few days after the incident. So we have the basic internal affairs investigation. I don't know what else is in that file, but I do know that Mr. Becker does know, and he was comfortable proceeding with second-degree murder. So I anticipate when I receive the file and I review it that there's not going to be more in there that pushes me in the other direction.
So
Why
this
not
way,
wait then?
is there enough in the internal affairs investigation that you have seen that would have led to his termination?
Yeah, I am comfortable with that moving forward, and knowing that it's unlikely that there's something in the Michigan State Police file that would guide it the other way, that I am.
Can you explain what's in the IA?
Sure. There's, we have the videos that have already been made publicly available, and then the interviews with the officer.
I guess more so the interview with the officer. What does he say in that? You know, what does
So
he say
that
anything?
interview is actually specifically Garrity protected, so I can't discuss that.
What could Scher have done differently? Do you feel like he did by the book, as it according to the GRPD's rules and regulation?
Look, from the beginning, there have been individuals which I've had many discussions with that said if Officer Scher had done this from the point he got out of the car, if he'd done this at this point, this at this point, this at this point, and then there's other individuals that had the same discussions about Mr. Lyoya. I don't think any of that is helpful. I think this judgment will be made on the use of force incident. The rest of it we can talk about as far as looking at policies and practices, et cetera. But you know, if anything had gone differently at any point in time during the day, you know, we could be talking about something else different altogether.
But what I'm really asking is, I mean, you've been in law enforcement for 2 decades. I'm saying, not to say if you were Officer Scher, but I'm saying, do you feel as though he did what he was supposed to do by the books, giving all the evidence that you've seen so far?
From what I've seen so far, the second-degree murder charge and my employment decision will be made on those last few seconds of the incident only.
What are some policy changes that you see as of now that, okay, I know what went wrong? Is it de-escalation techniques more for, you know, your officers?
As Mr. Davis said, so we'll do a thorough review. And again, I don't have the file yet. We will do a thorough review. I know Mr. Davis is going to do the same to see what sort of policy changes can be informed by this incident. But I have to say again that since I started on March 7th, in my first 90 days, my plan the entire time was to do a complete and thorough policy and training review of the department, and that was ongoing during this incident. So whether or not this incident would happen, I'm always going to seek to make sure that the Grand Rapids Police Department has the best practices.
Have you had conversations with your police officers that are there currently? You mentioned that they had a strong relationship with Officer Scher.
Yeah, it's a small department. I mean, it's not small. It's about 300. But if you picture any company or group with 300 people, there are a lot of people that have a close relationship with the officer. So as many of the officers as I could before I came over here today, I did have face-to-face conversations with them to let them know what I would be saying today at the press conference.
What were those conversations like, and what did they say?
Yeah, it's just really communication. I was just explaining why the decisions that I made.
What does this message send to your police department, that an officer can actually face second-degree murder charges for shooting someone?
Well, I don't think it's a message to the police department. I think it's just, that's a fact of the world. Police officers aren't above the law. So, but I don't see it as a specific message to the Grand Rapids Police Department. Yes, sir.
So I know you said that the determination is going to be based on the last couple seconds of the video. But the situation that led to the use of force is one that police encounter every day. So I'd like to know what should have been done differently. What should be something that's coming up among the rank and file, like, yes, every day I encounter noncompliance, or somebody gets out of the car when I tell them not to. So
Yeah, I'm sure Mr. Lyoya's family, I'm sure this officer, I'm sure a lot of friends and loved ones of both of those groups have looked at this incident, have looked at this video and said, if this went differently. But as far as the criminal charges and as far as the personnel decision, we're just talking about the use of force incident, the actual shooting at the end.
Sure, but you run the whole department, right? So is that not useful information to how the officer conducted himself and how he should have conducted himself in the time leading up to the use of force?
Yeah, absolutely. And I see every situation, every incident, whether good or bad, is always an opportunity for us to improve. And so, as I said, I'll be doing a complete incident review. Mr. Davis is going to do an incident review. And if there are other aspects of the case other than the use of force incident that we can improve on, we certainly will.
So just related to that, are there any other officers on any kind of leave in connection with this incident right now?
No.
What happens to the relationship now with you and the Kent County Prosecutor's Office?
Well, I don't think it'll be. I mean, I haven't spoken to him in 2 months, so we haven't had any relationship the past 2 months. But he's a professional, I'm a professional, so I don't see it being an issue.
You mentioned it being a difficult time for your department because of these charges. Earlier this morning, the FOP made a Facebook post basically suggesting, in incidents like this, officers are going to walk off the job. We're not police. Are you at all concerned about your officers doing the job with the fear that, hey, I might be charged?
So it's over the past few years, it's been a very difficult time to be the police. I cannot imagine a more difficult department across the country right now to be a police officer in than Grand Rapids Police Department. However, I will say, as I said in my opening remarks, that we've been dealing with this for 2 months. We've had 8 murders over the past month. These officers, these detectives, have been doing an absolutely professional and exceptional job under the most challenging conditions. And the city of Grand Rapids should be appreciative of that. I know this is a kind of a strange time to be saying that, but I am so proud of the work that I've seen from these officers the past 2 months under these conditions. I couldn't be more impressed by them.
Let's go 3 more questions, please.
Chief, an attorney for the Lyoya family said today was a step toward justice, and the justice would be a conviction, but this is going to go to trial. Do you worry about the relationship that's obviously already strained between the GRPD and the community if a jury does not convict Officer Scher?
Well, number one, I think that's a long way down the road. Number two, I don't want to make comments about that because, like I said, he has the right to be presumed innocent until proven guilty, and I don't think it'd be appropriate for me to discuss, what could be happening in the trial down the road.
Do you expect to testify?
I would be surprised if I did, but nothing really. I doubt it.
I have this question. I mean, you come from Chicago. I'm sure you've seen these types of situations play out all the time over there. What kind of experience, I guess, did you learn from being in Chicago to deal with this situation with one of your officers killing an unarmed black man?
Yeah, and unfortunately, it is something that I have a lot of experience with Chicago. And I said the experience that I brought here was, for example, the release of the video. In my experience, balancing the needs or the wants of the prosecutor and the investigating unit to keep the information private, and to balance that with the desire of the community for that transparency is something that I think in 2022 we have to really realize that when that many people are calling and demanding to see the video, it is important to get that information out. So that's what I learned in Chicago was communicate early and communicate thoroughly.
How much has Scher been paid, since he was placed on paid administrative leave?
I have no idea.
Okay, last question.
We know second-degree murder charge, we know as of now protesters are out protesting in front of GRPD. What is the ultimate message that you have for them?
For the protesters, I support the First Amendment right. Let your voices be heard.
Okay, thank you, everybody.